you imagine when you first opened up your Facebook account, it was so basic.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
Basically, you just wanted to see that your old school friends had had lives. That's the main reason.
But
No, where's your old girlfriends?
Yeah. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We've got not only a special guest, but a special location. We're here in Dublin, in Ireland, in a pub called O'Neill's, but it's not a chain, it's a proper old Irish pub, which is very cool. Hopefully, Pierre, you'll get some B-roll so that everyone can see the magnificence of the place. And one of the reasons we're here is to meet Niall Norton, who's CEO of Openet, which is an Irish telecom software company in the sort of BSS type of area. So thanks a lot, Niall.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for inviting us over here.
Pleasure to be here, drinking pints.
Well, indeed. Oh, yes, and of course we cheers. We've got the obligatory Guinness. Cheers, Jamie. It's getting involved. Which, of course, it would have been rude not to have. Okay. So we are going to talk. We're going to start by talking about a subject close to Niall's heart, which is the topic of monetization of telecom services, basically, which is, yes, what your company does, but also means that you know a thing or two about it, hopefully, or we're about to find out.
Indeed.
And that will probably lead us on to broader topics like digital transformation, 5G, and that sort of thing. And then I also thought, as we're in Ireland, let's talk a bit of geopolitics. There's some. We're doing this podcast in the week of all kinds of Brexit hysteria kicking off in the UK. And obviously, the UK is the biggest trading partner of Ireland, so I'd be interested to know what your views are from a business point of view, although if you want to muck in on the politics, you're more than welcome as well. And then also, I thought while we're talking about that, I'm quite interested to know your view also on the other big geopolitical thing that affects business right now, which is the US-China trade war, and obviously that affects Huawei, which presumably has some kind of overlap with what you do. So any thoughts you have on that? So those are the things we're going to talk about. And just to remind you that if you're watching this on the website or on YouTube or on Facebook, you can listen to it on SoundCloud or iTunes or countless other platforms. Okay, so just to tee it up for you, Niall. So we had a little chat earlier. You guys have done some research about how people perceive telcos as brands and as, I suppose, just as companies they interact with, what value they attach to them and that sort of thing. And there's long been, a brand and awareness problem they've had for a while is, are they just a utility? Are they just like a water company or an electricity company? Or are they something a little bit more? And obviously, digital brands such as Amazon or Google or Facebook or Spotify or whatever, they're pretty cool brands. Kids are associated with them. Certainly my kids, if they're not on YouTube, they're asleep, basically.
Yeah.
So they're in a bit of a dilemma when it comes to monetization, which we'll move on to. But I just thought I'd start there. Why don't you briefly summarise your research as to what you found about how people perceive telcos?
Yeah, it's interesting. The background to the research we do is very much trying to predict a little bit about how the industry will evolve. And who will be players and what part in the value chain there will be players in. A year ago we did research which talked about, do you trust OTT guys, do you trust service providers? And overwhelmingly the answer was we certainly trust the telecoms guys more. The research we've just completed was very much along the lines of, do you think that telecoms guys can be credible digital service providers? Do you use them as digital service providers? Is this a game they can win? Ultimately is what we're trying to actually figure out, because if you're trusted and you are capable of not being laughed out of town by pretending to be a digital service provider, that opens up a whole universe of different revenue models you might move to in the future,
rather than just billing for connectivity alone,
rather than just being a utility pipe because no one wants to know you, kind of thing. We found that 70% of people who we talk to believe that the service providers can be credible as a digital service provider, that the digital engagement is there, it can be better, sure, but it's not something that they would have a problem with. In fact, it's something that they'd welcome to see happen more of. And it sounds simple, but it's actually really important, because the revenue models as you look into the next 3, 4, 5 years are going to not be built up off selling, a pipe, and it really doesn't matter whose pipe it is because the water coming through it tastes the same anyway. But the brand and being able to either sell under their own brand and expand that to other things, or be able to be a platform, an enabling platform for other people's brands coming through in a kind of B2B2C kind of way. And I keep using the years ago there was a thing about Intel. Everyone was selling computers, but there was Intel inside.
Yeah.
The reality is a Vodafone, AT&T, a Bell, if people can feel good about the fact that Bell are delivering a service, or Vodafone are delivering a service, or Orange are delivering a service, can they build up their brand so that that becomes a thing that you would want to say if you were selling home security or something? Probably you can. And the big thing for us as well is that the dialogue that an operator can have with their end customers, whether it's a business customer or a consumer, becomes really, really important if you're going to broaden out the services you sell.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to dive into, well, what are you talking about? What services?
Well, quite.
And I'll come to that in a minute, but the research is really important, and it's a series of different pointed questions at a point in time where we're trying to gauge, as we're about to develop our next features and benefits, or features and of our products, are the operators ever going to get there?
Yeah.
No matter what they say publicly, are they going to be able to get there with their own customers? We believe they can. We're very upbeat about selling a broadened portfolio of suites out of the sweet shop, but also selling other people's suites through that sweet shop too. They're the two big areas where we see kind of revenue in the future.
Do you think they can, Jamie?
Yeah, I think there are companies that are doing it already.
It's just quite a recurring theme for our podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this entire model, the convergence model, which I know you're not talking about directly, but it is fundamentally convergence. It's you're adding another prong, which is another service stream, and another column in the financial spreadsheets. And I think there's certain companies that are proving that you can already do it, and I think they're probably the leading telco worldwide at the moment. And Orange is a perfect example.
Orange is the one,
they got fixed, they got mobile, they got content offering which they own themselves. Admittedly, it's slightly different from what you're talking about in terms of plugging in and embedding in other video services. But I mean, you look at what else they're doing, and you were talking about sort of how else you make money. Their cybersecurity business is just growing ridiculously fast. Their bank is another sort of digital sort of prong which they're adding in, and it's these sort of multi-services, and I think this will make the winner and losers of telcos in the next 4 or 5 years. Those who nail the convergence model will be an incredibly successful business, and those who can't will really suffer. And I think there's some that are really obvious. They're really suffering at the moment as well. O2, top of my head, they're
just in the UK, or are you talking about Telefonica in general?
No, O2. Right. I think their business model looks fundamentally flawed, and I think the management team is starting to get the picture now, and they're coming round to the idea of additional services, embedding sort of like digital services as well as convergence into their entire business.
The thing is, what we've noticed, if you take guys like Orange, Vion, as they were and will be in the future, AT&T, Globe, all the a bunch of these kind of folks, they're much better typically, or they're injecting DNA from outside into their businesses, which are emboldening them to think about things differently, which is great. They're much better than we'll ever be as a vendor about knowing what it is they want to do. We're a whole lot better than they will ever be about how to do it. And a lot of what we did in terms of technology investment over the last couple of years was to be ready for, we're not quite sure what it'll be, because everybody will have a different one. Sometimes it's going to be power and utilities and cybersecurity and banking. At the other end of the spectrum, it could be opening up your network to, Joe Security, selling home, Ring.com services on your network. But being able to automate and configure for a range of different things.
That's part of what Orange are doing, aren't they? They're sort of like white labelling their sort of connectivity as part of an overall security solution.
And they're a little bit ahead of what a number of other people who collaborate with them are also contemplating in the US, particularly that opening up the network and allowing people sell through. and having the right kind of environment for that kind of thing is a thing, you know.
And I think one of the best examples, and you touched on it just then when you're talking about emerging markets. I think partly when you look at companies like Netflix, Amazon Prime, those guys, the reason that they do look much more competent at it in the emerging markets is because there's a necessity. They don't have that direct to consumer relationship in, say, like Saudi Arabia. Or I think one of the big problems Netflix has in certain Middle Eastern countries is that there's some sort of like legal issue about processing certain credit cards. So all of a sudden you cannot access those customers if you're a Netflix sales and marketing guy. But if you tag in and add STC, start offering a digital services products through. That's the window opportunity. So it's a necessity as much as flexibility.
As you get into the converged world, that delivery of the service and how they're delivered becomes really interesting, because if you can provide the connectivity and the enablement, financially viable enablement of all these services, so it's all convenient, so that you could offer micro campaigns, multiples of them every week if you wanted to, or notifications, whatever the heck it is. It becomes a really interesting kind of opportunity space, because if you're the most enabling network for all the content providers out there, then they'll come to you, and then everybody wants to, you become the standard.
Well, this is so the issue there is that I've had a few conversations with various operators around Europe, and they refuse to go on record with it, but the OTTs don't want exclusivity. The telcos want exclusivity in the market. The OTTs won't give it to them, but the OTTs are demanding exclusivity through that telco channel. So I don't think you're ever going to see a service, or at least in the next couple of years, or maybe 5 to 10 years, where you have a telco service and it has multiple embedded of the major OTTs. Like I can't imagine you'd ever see Disney sat alongside Netflix, and Netflix is never sat alongside Amazon in any of the telco partnerships at the moment. It's usually one or the other. The
picture you're painting there seems to be that the OTTs are still kind of throwing their weight around, because they seem to want to have their cake and eat it. They won't give themselves exclusively to one operator, but they'll kick up a fuss if the operator has one of their competitors at the same time.
I think both sides of the relationship set to benefit from this massively, and the OTTs realise that the telcos are really incredibly valuable partners, especially in the emerging markets where maybe I don't know, cash is king. Let's say in India, where plastic payments have never really taken off. So how does Netflix access those consumers? The way they access them is through these telcos.
And if you jump into a 5G world where your home router, which just happens to be you're living in an apartment, so nobody's going to cable up the building, your home router comes with you whenever you move. But if you've bundled all the services through your service provider, you only have to cancel, or you don't even have to cancel a single account. It just travels with you wherever you go. I think that there's a timing issue here where you get onto this, I demand exclusivity, but I'm not going to give it to you. That, to me, is a temporal thing. I suspect that it will change over time, because technology won't allow that kind of crazy wall to exist. It would be my guess. Short term, sure, but long term, I just don't think it'll stay that way.
That does sort of lead to the query I have, which you alluded to earlier, about, so when you guys were talking about your research, content partnerships featured quite strongly. And obviously I can see why, because an obvious thing that people spend a lot of money on that we call digital is Netflix and so on.
Sure.
But again, I can see that getting commoditized very quickly. I can't see how an operator could differentiate themselves. They're not going to get, as Jamie just said, they're not going to get Netflix exclusivity. So then everyone's offering Netflix for the same amount of money. Yes, it becomes a potentially some source of extra incremental revenue, but it's certainly not a differentiator. So I guess what that leads me on to is just asking you what other types of monetization you imagine operators would do over and above this sort of content partnership type of thing.
You look like you're about to say something there.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is,
Do you not agree with the premise?
No. I agree with you, but I just don't.
I couldn't see your face while I was talking to Niall.
I don't think that's. I think. I do genuinely think network performance is still a massive buying factor. You know, the dominance of and market share of UK telcos is incredibly. Admittedly, O2 is the leader in the market for various reasons, mainly because it has subscribers of its own and MVNO partnerships.
Yeah.
But EE is a top dog around the UK. But if you look in South Wales, Vodafone is one of the dominant players because Vodafone has the best performing network in South Wales, and I think network performance is still a massive contributing factor when everything else starts to plateau. But I think there's numerous service lines I think that you can build into it.
I think there is, and they kind of broadly speaking, from what we can see anyway, they fall into kind of two categories. One is where you're enabling a Netflix, a B2B2C kind of model. And the other is when you're actually pushing services directly through yourselves, if you will, banking, utilities, and all the other kind of bits and pieces. And I think there's a huge opportunity for expansion by all of the operators in a controlled kind of manner. Now, you get into healthcare, there's issues like, Jesus, if I have a healthcare service and someone dies, do I get sued and all the other kind of bits and pieces. But, you know, you look at the super app providers, the WeChats. You know, these guys have payments, they have restaurant booking, they have right to review. You go to restaurants, there's no human beings in there. Your order isn't taken in advance, it comes out in a tray, you pay in advance, and all that kind of carry on. The Medical 365 doesn't claim to be a surgery, it claims to be the early stage kind of triage kind of thing, and you know, if it turns out that it's something minor, they'll automatically contact the pharmacy, who'll drop around with the guy, you know, who'll give you the Bicidol or whatever the hell it is you need to actually fix yourself. So there's a lot of innovation on the direct sales piece. Very little of that historically was ever capable of being enabled because the costs were so prohibitive, and the inflexibility, it took forever to do it, and so on and so forth.
And why was it? Was that a technology thing? Was it companies like yours not doing a good enough job of facilitating it?
I think it was.
That was a nasty question, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
By the way, I've just noticed Niall's drinking us under the table here, Jamie. We've got to raise our game.
Yeah, I didn't want to kind of make that point, but the reality.
We did have one in the hotel as well, though. So.
Sure you did. Any witnesses, you know, posted on Instagram. The up until NFE, SDN, and that whole kind of evolution towards orchestrated services and the cloud and the what 5G could offer as regards kind of different service slices required a different contemplation of there's more than one way of skinning the cat. Historically, when up to 4G, you know, radio was radio, and all subscribers in a cell were equal, no matter what. Now you could think slightly differently, but ignore mobile altogether. In the background, you had OTT guys, you had the internet kind of gurus who were actually building super apps, and they were developing ecosystems of value all on their own. They killed the telcos in lots of different business models. I mean, I was in O2 way back in the day when we did the XDA. And the XDA was 4 or 5 years before the iPhone ever came out. Brilliant product. Horribly marketed in the sense that, you know, the technology wasn't there to make it happen. It was
a handset, was it?
Yeah, it was a handset.
Was it Nokia?
No, it was one that O2 actually built themselves.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but it had Active Sync from Microsoft in a very early incarnation. It did but it was like Windows 3.1 for Windows kind of, you know. When
you had a stylus and little drop-down menus, I had that. I'm old enough to remember those dark days.
But the technology up until now hasn't been there in terms of enabling that, and also I think that the marketing imagination was never allowed free because the technology was largely manually driven. If you want to deploy a new service, increase capacity, do whatever you want to do, you sent a team of engineers down, they built a new rack in your data center, you installed lots of boxes, you configured this new service, and away you went. It took, on a good day, the best networks could do it in 6 weeks for a new service being enabled, and that was the very best. But it was all expensive.
Yeah. So you had to make the business case and demonstrate ROI and all that.
You know, now the existing under technology that exists today, and as 5G networks are being spec'd by clever operators, create a new service in 20 minutes, and you can put it live with trial customers and so on and so forth, if you have the right infrastructure.
So that's thanks to all the sort of cloud and virtualization and all that.
Cloud virtualization, I think the modularization of software, because if you have a use case which is a smart building, and somebody's going to pay €1 a month for it, you better be sure the cost to serve behind the scenes is less than €1 a month, or it's not going to happen.
I think there's a couple of interesting points that to come off the back of what you said there. I mean, first of all, I strongly suspect that not all of the telcos will be able to adapt culturally to actually enable this fail-fast business model and sort of quick allocation and validation of services before scale rollout. Secondly, I think the marketing department is going to have to be gutted. These marketeers are built on the mentality of bigger, faster, meaner. The only way we get customers is by saying we're either cheaper or faster than someone else.
Speeds and feeds or price.
They need more creative thinking in there. And the final point is, I think that, I mean, you're talking about new services and new ideas. I mean, I don't even think we can conceive what is going to be on the market. I mean, this is probably the most exciting thing about 5G. And you can see it from the 4G market. Yeah. Like Uber, who would have thought?
Airbnb.
Airbnb. Yeah. So Airbnb, Uber, the dominance of WeChat. Who could have thought that these would have been dominant brands in 2011? It's only because they seem so obvious to us now. And I strongly suspect that in 5 years' time, once 5G has been scaled and the clever guys in various labs have had a chance to validate ideas on the network, we'll have an idea and we'll just go, well, when do we think of that? Because Uber seems like the most obvious idea in the world when you think about it.
Yeah. That one-step incremental innovation is probably true. And it's funny, I had a conversation over the weekend. Our CTO, a guy called Joe Hogan, who's founder in Openet, he's a big believer in this. Now, he's a big deep domain techie. And for a guy who's in love with the technology, he's got a real good head and his shoulders from the point of view of one-step innovation. So if you take Uber, it's one step off what we were already used to. It's understandable, it's digestible, and the relevance is obvious.
So it doesn't require too much of an intuitive leap for people to use?
No, and then once you've got that leap, then obviously delivering food, well, why not? It's the same platform. Yeah. Delivering concert tickets and blah, 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 blah. Suddenly you're challenging the post office for high priority parcel delivery. None of which, suddenly you can do Uber for bicycle rental and all these things. These things are if you described Uber as it is now to when Uber started, people go, forget it. Yeah, it's just way out there. So that incremental kind of innovation is a really interesting kind of concept. But
Facebook are the masters of that.
Yeah.
You look at how they've gradually got more and more entwined with our lives. Yeah. Can you imagine when you first opened up your Facebook account? It was so basic.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
basically you just wanted to see that your old school friends had lives. That's the main reason.
But
no, where's your old girlfriends?
Yeah.
But look
stalk your old exes.
It's horrific. If you told someone in 2008 this is what Facebook would emerge to, they'd be absolutely horrified.
But that's why I love that Black Mirror stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watch those TV shows.
Oh yeah, big fan.
And maybe not all of it's true, but God, it's scary and it's not inconceivable.
Yeah, it's one step along. Yeah, that's why Charlie Brooker does it so well. He doesn't go too utopian or too dystopian. He's just, we're only one step away from this crazy stuff right now.
So when things started moving, or not moving as it were, we had a fair bit of reorganisation to do in 2017-18. I think I talked to you guys about that before. And some of that was very, very painful, and some of it was good. It was good from the point of view of, we sat back and exactly to your point about we don't know what's coming next. We have absolutely no idea really what new business models will come about. What we can tell you is, if they're in this category of things, like a 5G router, a wireless router that sits in your house and you're going to move around, or it's going to have things like convenient pay-per-view, a real-time offer manager, third-party being sold through, categories of problems. We're brilliant at how to do these things.
Yeah.
And so we went off and looked at our technology architecture and said, okay, we have no idea what it will be, but it probably looks something like this.
Yeah.
And so we went ahead and found...
And you might as well at least be heading roughly in that direction until you've got a better idea of exactly what it'll be.
Exactly.
I mean, the one thing that scares me about, and sort of building on what you said, the one thing that scares me about the telco industry is that these services, these brand new services that we can't actually think of or conceive or imagine at the moment, it's probably some lad in MIT who's in his third year of university who's going to come up with that idea.
Oh, yeah.
Or someone in Stanford who's a fresher this year, or someone who's graduating from uni, from high school and doesn't even think about going to uni, just has this brilliant idea.
Yeah.
But who are they going to go work for? Are they going to go work for a telco, or are they going to go work for, some VC or Facebook or Google or these Silicon Valley companies? So I wonder if the telco is going to attract those smarts to actually enable these business models.
It's an interesting one. I hadn't thought about it. Right now, they'll go to Silicon Valley and they'll go to these. That may not always be the case.
No.
Yeah,
I think some of those Silicon Valley giants are already starting to look a little bit sort of flabby and sort of too corporate.
Yeah, they do attract graduates.
No, I'm sure
they still do attract.
But where do you go if you're not going there? Do you go to a smaller one, or do you go to a telco? And that's.
I mean, this is where you start seeing across the US this.
Thank you very much, Jonathan from Openet.
You look at where's the fastest growing technology market in the US at the moment. It's not Silicon Valley. It's the likes of New York or Colorado or Boston. You've got these new emerging tech centres, and that's where I think the next surge is going to be, because I think you're right, Google's looking too corporate, although their Moon Labs is absolutely fantastic.
But if you get into environments like, say, the US, things like, say, payments and what I'm going to call the new version of e-commerce in that sense, Asia Pacific is where all the action is that we can see right now, because there are far fewer regulations to worry about. Facebook push out Libra, everyone says, what the hell?
Yeah.
But there's actually virtual currencies already doing the rounds in some of the Asia Pacific kind of markets. They may not declare it as being a virtual currency, but it kind of really is.
Manny Pacquiao's just launched a virtual currency. I mean, if a boxer and politician can launch one. But yes, it's a bit more sinister when Facebook does it, isn't it?
I am prepared to sell Openet dollars, though, to anyone who'll buy them.
Openet bucks.
Yeah.
The problem with that, that's the issue with Facebook, is it doesn't have the credibility to... It's one thing... It's what people put fear in and put fear around, and people don't fear losing their personal identity at the moment, or their digital identity.
No, but I think Vodafone could do a better job than Facebook right now of launching a digital currency.
I think so, yeah, because they're trusted with financial information,
and they're also
you've already got a billing arrangement with them.
Yeah, and even the more conservative folks like me, I would trust a mobile operator tomorrow with my. I do, in fact, trust them with my personal data. I struggle hugely with the OTT guys. Maybe Apple I like, the rest I'm actually worried about.
This is a sort of frivolous aside, but did you hear that Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, got his account hacked, and people started putting up really questionable stuff from him? The method of the hack, to the best of my understanding, was through the operator, because there's a text to tweet type of thing, where you can send a text and it turns into a tweet. And that was the method by which they were able to hack his account.
See, this is the one thing that I think the telcos will really struggle with. I think they've got credibility and trust with the consumer, and I think that can be leveraged massively to make money with these startups. But technologically, I think in certain scenarios, like cybersecurity, they're perhaps behind the trend, and this isn't necessarily a massive issue for them, because I think it's an issue for everyone. I think everyone is behind the trend when it comes to cybersecurity. Cyber criminals are so far further ahead, but I think it can be, so much more pain can be realised through exploiting a telco than most other companies.
I'll tell you what, one other thing occurs to me where there's a natural, massive overlap between telcos and OTTs right now is two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
So for most digital products, you're going to set up two-factor authentication where they send you a text message, and then you think about it, it seems so straightforward, but then the chances of a bad guy both having your phone and your login details to hand are quite small, which is why two-factor authentication is so effective.
Well, I mean, this is where I think biometrics has to grow massively, because I think I use my fingerprint now for a lot of things, and I think facial recognition is great. I think that can only be a positive step forward.
It doesn't work for people who wear glasses, though, does it? I have to take one when I go through the airport. I have to take my glasses off every time. It really winds me up. First world problems.
But I think that's the first generation. No, but you don't have to when you're unlocking your phone, do you?
Right. Do you know what? I don't use it for my phone.
Oh, do you not? I mean, so I don't have to take my glasses off when I'm using my phone. But I think that's just the phone has like second, third generation of the software.
They just haven't got the memo at passport control. Fair enough.
It hasn't been updated. Maybe they can't afford it. I don't know. It might just be something as simple as that.
I've got one other thing I want to steer it towards on this topic before we talk about other stuff.
Speaking of airports.
Yes, that's true. International stuff. Is back to 5G. Mm-hmm. So one other reason why, I said perhaps unfairly earlier that one of the reasons operators haven't got their act together is because BSS vendors weren't giving them the capability of doing it. But another reason, even if you had, is cultural. You could have been serving up the absolute cutting edge of whatever you've got now 5 years ago, but they've still got to be ready to implement it and use it and use it in order to create new sort of products. And I wonder to what extent you think the advent of 5G has sort of lit a fire under them to innovate a bit more.
It's interesting though, if you take something like two-factor authentication we just talked about, we had that capability enabled and we were offering it up as basically a service as part of to cut down credit card fraud 5-6 years ago, and nobody wanted it, which is very sad because we thought it was a great idea. Now we weren't the only ones, but we could make this happen. We knew where you were. We could cross-correlate that against where the payment was being processed. You could actually say sure, just in case it was a kid playing around with your phone or something like this. But if no one wants to buy it, then it's just great technology with no home. And there's certainly a degree of that in the past. Culturally, very, very difficult for telcos. Marketing people, I'm a little more generous on the marketing people front, maybe because I think they live with economic restrictions on what the technology could do for so long that they became, your mindset became very kind of closed in on there's only a small range of things I can do. In the future, I think it's much more like the internet, and I think a lot of the operators are now effectively either trying to learn from or importing people from internet land. The Chief Digital Officer in AT&T is probably one of the more powerful execs, and he's ex-Walmart. So people are bringing in the skills, or they're certainly looking to leverage guys like McKinsey and Bain and these guys to give them that give them that think about things differently moment. Now, how quickly they'll get there, what's different from the past, because this was all stuff they could have done 5 years ago, is the technology's there, but so's the bogeyman. If they don't do it, WeChat are going to eat them alive, or insert OTT player here. Because MVNOs are easy to do, and nobody's competing on price in MVNO land anymore. Your super app is the internet, and a wall around you in the internet, if you will. The fact connectivity, they can add it on, is all the money is inside that wall.
Totally.
Well, I think some can adapt and some will adapt, and I think I can think of a couple of examples off the top of my head that are actually doing quite good jobs, and they're sort of moving into that sort of like that digital mind frame. And,
but you know what they did when they did? If you take Orange, right? Orange, brilliant example.
I think that was going to be my example.
But they took teams and said, off you go.
Yeah.
And they didn't allow them to get bogged down in the corporate business case scenario.
I said this, I can't remember who I said it to, about 2 years ago, and I'd love to see a telco which takes the alphabet approach to business, and they say, right, what we're going to do is we're going to put the core data connectivity utility model on one side, and we're going to have a parent company, which is the telco, and then we're going to completely ring fence some other futuristic ideas and investments. Never shall the two revenues meet, and see what happens.
I think part of the challenge there. So your Openet's not public, is it? No. But I'm sure you've got some sense of what the CEOs of public companies sort of have to go through in terms of their dialogue with their investors. And obviously, you presumably do have investors that you speak to. That's part of the problem, isn't it? I completely agree with Jamie, 100%. And I think most people can think, obviously, have a walled garden around your core cash cow. Don't mess with that, for God's sake. But then have your bit where you throw shit at the wall, to coin a phrase.
But it can still be profitable. It can still, like that core business model is immensely, sorry to interrupt, but it's incredibly profitable. It can be.
Yeah, totally.
But if you go back to what Orange did, for the first year and a half, at least, of some of those sapling businesses, they never told anyone about them. They just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
We've got experiments in OTT.
So be under the radar.
Yeah, keep it under the radar. Internally manage it until you're ready to talk about it, and then it's something that's good. And bear in mind, Orange were coming against the background of, Bouygues and these other guys were absolutely kicking seven bells out of them with free stuff and price erosion.
Well, free itself.
The guys did a really
good the brand itself.
They did a fantastic job of, building their own brand. People like them in France. They got the convergence thing going on. Now they're rolling out these services which look like overnight sensations built over 2 years.
Yeah, they do.
And it's just bang, 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 bang. And they did a really nice job of keeping that stuff out of the public domain. Because if you go, I used to be CFO with O2 here in Ireland. I was part of the kind of investor relations team. As soon as you put it out there, people will want to know more about it. So they kept it quiet. Like 2 years ago, I met the guys in Orange in Spain, where they had taken guys from France and dropped them into Spain so they could just be left alone to get on with some of the stuff they were doing.
So that's still proper sort of corporate governance due process. You're just not shouting it from the rooftops.
You're just not shouting it. And you're leaving the guys a little bit of room to fail fast, because you know what? If you haven't made big promises, then if you had to kill the unit because it didn't work, no big deal. Nobody loses their job.
And obviously you get horrible journalists like us. If you do make a big fuss of it and it fails, we'll be the first to write headlines on the subject.
Well, I think there are a couple of telcos that are doing it very well, and I think one of them, Orange, top of my head, is doing it very well. If you look at what T-Mobile is doing, they've evolved their business. And I'm still a bit umming and ahhing about their TV proposition to see whether it's actually going to be any good. But if it is any good.
Well, we did work with Globe in the Philippines, and their approach in TV was brilliant, because they went down the road of, let's be a TV company too. And the business plan involved hiring hundreds and hundreds of people. They were going to basically kind of become a full bells and whistles TV producer. Their CEO, Ernest, is a particularly good guy. He said, no, hang on a minute, tore up the plan. They hired a couple of hundred people tops. They produced a show, and they did a deal with Netflix to syndicate their content to the Filipino community globally. Boom! They're in the media business with 200 people, and they outsource.
And the one show.
Yeah. Now they distribute Netflix, but they actually get Netflix to distribute their stuff globally as part of that partnership deal. Really, really clever. But they have lots of small production companies that also contribute to their stable now. They don't have to be the full end-to-end, I own everything, I must control everything, because candidly they're not much good at it.
You don't want to be there.
No, you don't.
And this is where I feel AT&T, and we were talking about this last week. And this is where I've got it in my head that I really don't like this acquisition. First of all, I think they paid too much for it. By the time you factor in debt, it's like 120 billion, not 87, which is a ridiculous.
You can almost buy Openet.
But the other
heard
thing
it first here, folks.
The other thing you got to consider as well is, are the AT&T executives, considering they spent so much money on acquiring Time Warner, going to let them do their thing because Time Warner is a very good media business. As soon as AT&T and their traditional claws start getting involved in Time Warner,
and they've got some lifer suddenly telling the HBO guy what movies or what TV series to make.
Are they? I mean, fundamentally, they're two different risk propositions: telco and media creation. I think they're two very different risk mentalities.
I suspect that certainly we do a lot of business with AT&T, and there's some very smart folks in there. Having
Good
access
little
to
caveat there, I like your style.
having a access to the library that comes with that acquisition is enormously powerful.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Otherwise, Disney would rule the world entirely. But what we've seen is the transition is pretty light touch, as in. Do you remember? What the hell was it called? The show with Tina Fey.
30 Rock.
30 Rock. Yeah.
Pierre is here, everyone.
Where GE take over NBC or whatever the case may be. I suspect that was very funny the way they did it. I suspect you're going to see something.
I reckon, honestly, yeah.
I think you'll see it'll be better.
Well, they'd be mad to be otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, I presume they're not stupid guys, and they know it's a big risk, and they've done a lot of thought. They've put a lot of thought into how to do it properly. But there's also, as Jamie was alluding to, it's always that worry that within large corporates, just egos start to kick in.
I think
and
AT&T
someone goes, "Well, I'm the man, so it's got to be done my way."
But AT&T is a really interesting kind of company, because what they're doing in terms of transforming the deal with IBM. Transforms the whole IT side of the business. John Donovan is now leaving. It's scary for them.
Sorry, we got the bleep.
Scary for what comes next. Like their capacity to see snake and then kill snake is much better than most corporates that we've seen in the world. If you look how long the T-Mobile Sprint merger has been going on. I mean, Anna Karenina is a shorter story than that one.
Yes, I mean, the one thing that does fuel my skepticism about this whole deal as well, and I say there's more than one thing that fuels my skepticism of it, but
Guinness.
Absolutely.
Year before beginning of last summer, when I was actually playing a rugby game, and afterwards, the wife of one of my sort of mates down at the rugby club actually works for Time Warner, and she turned around to me and she said, and I said, "Oh, how's it going? War and work chat. How's it going with the AT&T integration?" And she did point out to me that travel budgets had been absolutely slashed, and everyone in Time Warner was super pissed about it. Because they liked going around and meeting people in the company and developing ideas face to face. The culture of Time Warner was to send someone over to California for 2 weeks so they can workshop some ideas and then come up with this great thing and bring it back to London. And AT&T just went, not doing that anymore. So that's
is that a temporal thing though?
Things like that I worry about.
Could be a short term.
The problem in some respects is where these things really kick in as problems is when. An acquiring company thinks they're better at the business. So if you take, say, budgetary control or travel is slashed for a while, that may be during an integration kind of phase. But I've seen AT&T, and we've been part of when they did the Apple deal for iPhone, and then they did the Apple deal for iPad, and it's quite funny because the compare and contrast for me was, Apple were very unambiguous about the way things would be. And it was a really interesting kind of dynamic of that partnership. If you take something like the Time Warner Cable thing, I think that...
And it paid off for AT&T massively,
hugely.
isn't it? Yeah.
And in fairness, as you wander around the buildings and you're meeting some of the executives, Steve Jobs, there's a signed picture from Steve Jobs for the key executives who were instrumental in making it all work. I mean, the attention to detail was phenomenal. But it was a very, very stressful kind of period for both companies, I suspect. I think the size of the deal with Time Warner Cable and other deals that have tanked in the past will mean that they're too smart to let that.
But the one thing that I'm being skeptical here because I always look for. I genuinely believe that most people go back to their roots and they can't deny their gut instinct. And if you work for a telco, you might have been telling investors all the way through the period, the acquiring periods, we're going to let Time Warner do their own thing, carry on doing it. But the reality of actually letting them carry on with that risk mentality is very different.
But if you look at what else is going on in AT&T or AT&T Prime, John Donovan's going, the chief digital officer guy is in from Walmart. It's a very different kind of environment. It's not like they can afford to make a mistake or stand still. And I don't believe they are any more than I think that candidly Verizon are making a mistake either. It was 4 years ago, Verizon talked about the open network. And Niall, the chairman at the time, basically was talking about programmable networks way before anyone else was. And they're definitely heading into that kind of space of doing that stuff. It's interesting. I think telcos learned a lot from the days when they wanted to own the walled garden of content and all that kind of crazy stuff. The internet in your pocket.
Everyone would love that. Everyone wants to completely own the consumer or the customer.
Everyone's seen how much money Facebook's made off it for years and years and years.
And the fact is, the internet gave rise to Airbnb and Uber and all these other kind of bits and pieces. Not the telco guys. All of whom could have given birth to all of these businesses.
Indeed. Okay.
Well, this is the way. One final thing. This is the one thing that, again, don't get me wrong. Firstly, I massively believe in convergence. I think it's an incredibly valid and it will be a really successful business model. But one of the other things that I genuinely really worry about is when you look at the telcos is that they've already lost the battle for the living room. When you actually look at, they should have won that. They had a router there. They had a piece of hardware in the living room already. They could have owned the smart home and the smart living room ecosystem. Yet what's happened? How many millions of hundreds of millions of smart speakers have been shipped now?
Not to my house, I hate to
not to your house, but my mum and dad have got one. And they're 70. So it's penetrating in sort of every aspect of society.
I'm not having it.
The internet players have won control of that ecosystem. It's just how many other these little mini ecosystems can the telcos retain, like the connected car? Can the telco retain?
Do you think they can retain the win? Because when I was a young lad 1,000 years ago, when I joined Openet 2004, conventional wisdom was Symbian was the operating system to around, and BlackBerry was my favourite strapped to my hip device. I had to strap it to my hip because my son kept throwing it down the toilet. He thought it was a great place to store it for me.
He was obviously wise before his time.
But nobody would have thought in 2004 that there was anything other than Nokia in the future.
iOS and Android.
So I think, they've lost it now. The future ecosystems of value may have them back in the mix.
It's a tricky one because the telcos, they possibly lost control of certain places, and Nokia possibly lost control because they weren't aggressive enough in pursuing new opportunities and driving innovation. And the only way that Google and Amazon or Baidu or Alibaba, whoever's got it in China and the Far East and those sorts of markets is going to lose control of the ecosystem if they stop this aggressive drive towards innovation. But I mean, look at them at the moment. Are they slowing down their R&D spend? They're constantly pushing.
Well, they've got such ridiculous profits; they can lob money out all day.
So they need to The only reason I can see that, say, like Facebook or Amazon or Google loses control of the smart home is because they stop spending and they stop innovating. And at the moment, it doesn't look like they're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I've got one more little thing, and I'm going to draw a line over it because I do want to move on to at least one other topic before. Seeing as we're talking about the smartphone OS thing, that's sort of playing into my strengths in a previous life, and I firmly believe the reason. So there's two things that's interesting. They don't necessarily contradict what you say, but they complicate it. There's two things that's interesting. The reason they lost, in my opinion, is Touch UI. The Touch UI for iOS and Android was much, much better than it was for Symbian, and certainly for Windows Mobile, which still have fucking styluses and drop-down menus and stuff like that. And also, at that time, Nokia, I remember writing a story, Nokia had about, and this could have been not just on smartphones, so I don't know precisely how it segments, but Nokia had about 5 to 10 times more R&D spend than Apple. So yes, R&D spend obviously is significant, but you could be like Nokia and spend that money on R&D, but still not get that the paradigm has shifted and it's moved on to a much better touch UI, tile-based touch UI, and no one cares about your stuff. However, they created these little business units called OVI to create these new digital services and all that stuff, and it was shutting the stable door after the horse had bolted. Anyway, that's that.
I mean, I think if you look at you've been looking at it a lot more intently than I have. But if you look at when sort of like Google and Amazon are how much they're investing in voice control, but Google, if I'm correct in saying, investing a significant amount in gesture control as well, aren't they? So that I think could be really, especially when you're looking at wearables.
Yeah.
I think that could be a really interesting development.
Voice and gesture are definitely the next UIs. Okay, I'm being...
It's actually on that point. I bought a drone recently, boys and toys and all that kind of good stuff. My 12-year-old gets to the blame for all the important stuff I imported.
We got a bleeper.
But the drone, the camera, does gesture control.
Oh, that's good.
You can fly it.
Yeah.
Just with the hand signals.
And then he gets into this very sort of science fiction-y stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to finally steer the conversation. No, this is good. Actually, it's good if I fail to do it because it means the conversation's going really well.
Jamie, help me out here, brother.
See if we can sabotage Scott for 5 more minutes.
So tell me more about Nokia, Jamie.
maybe I'll just doesn't want to talk about Brexit, which is fair enough. No, so we'll keep it very top line because we haven't got that much time left. But you're a CEO of a company, so you have to think.
Yeah.
And you're a former CFO, so you presumably particularly dialed into the financial side of things. You have to think about sort of global risk. So we've got 2 things going on, but let's start with Brexit, because right now we've got all this. We seem to be finally reaching the end game in the UK,
sure,
where something happens. So my cards on the table. I voted out. I'd rather they just got on with it. I had no deal. Let's just get on with it. Put up with a bit of short-term pain.
Sure.
I seem to be in a minority, and that's fine. But either way, I'm just wondering from your point of view, when you're chatting to your colleague, the founder, the CFO, about risk associated with Brexit, and you're an Irish company, is there a lot of risk for you guys, or are you quite sanguine about it?
For Openet directly, there's relatively little risk. We do a lot of work with BT and everything everywhere, and we're delighted to do it.
Sorry, man, we're a couple of Guinnesses in there.
Indeed. No, but it's from that perspective, I think that Brexit, no Brexit, not going to be life changing for us one way or the other.
Right.
If I stand back and I look at me as an Irish guy, the problem for Ireland is when the UK was in Europe, we had best friends who had the same kind of interests, who could lobby the same way, which is different from maybe some of the more continental people. Right. That would be a loss from our perspective. Right now, backstops and all these other kind of stuff is hugely important for the island of Ireland.
Yeah.
But actually, it's making a lot of noise. Imagine for a moment tomorrow that was a solved issue. The UK exits the European Union. We're kind of on our own, and we're feeling very lonely at that stage.
I can imagine.
And that would be a problem because, when the Queen visited here several years ago now, when the English rugby team came and played in Croke Park, you have absolutely no idea the seismic change it made in relations.
Really?
Oh, like when I was in college, I thought maybe my grandchildren would see peace in Ireland.
Right.
And
suddenly,
yeah, and so the fact that the UK is kind of leaving the European Union, we've won fewer friends. I think probably most Irish people think it's a good idea to be in rather than out.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody here would, I don't think anyone misunderstands why people want to leave at the same time they're in the UK. The backstop thing isn't a problem that is being introduced to try and prevent people leaving, and it's kind of characterised a little bit that way sometimes.
It does feel like that sometimes to me, I've got to be honest.
But Reg MP, the guy up north, came up with a good idea. He said, well, what happens if the UK just indemnifies people for bad stuff happening? How about that? That's a pretty interesting kind of solution. I'm not a big believer that with the current Downing Street kind of arrangements, that they're actually coming up with anything that can work.
No, I agree with you on that. I think my feeling, to get into the pure politics for a sec, can be completely self-indulgent. I think Boris Johnson's acting like he's trying to look for some kind of deal, because for him to just come out and go, yeah, I'm going for no deal, would be politically very damaging for him. So, but I think he's quite resigned to it. It's interesting what you say about the cultural stuff. You're talking about the Queen coming over and all that sort of thing. Because anytime I come here, like my brother married an Irish woman, so I come over to Ireland quite a lot. And I've always felt a real cultural affinity with Irish. I've just found it so easy to get on with Irish people. Obviously, we've got shared language. Yeah. But, we've been geographically next to each other since the dawn of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that doesn't just go away, does it? So, and obviously, the flip side of being next to each other at the one time is there's a fair bit of historical baggage as well, which we won't go into now, but we're all acutely aware of. But I think the underlying thing is that we've got a lot culturally in common.
Oh, massively, yeah.
And I think that would probably be my biggest regret, and I think it will get sorted out. As a leaver, I have to believe that these things will get sorted out. But that would be my biggest regret, is if it caused a sort of distance. As you say, we've only just got back together after troubles and all the various historical things. That would be a real shame. But I'm also pleased to hear that from you guys. I guess, getting it back to the business side of things, as I've stopped indulging myself now. I think a lot of companies are, back to our core subject, digital.
Yeah.
So people talk about borders, people talk about a backstop and about people taking goods in lorries over the border, which is obviously a real logistical issue.
Yeah.
But you don't have a border with digital stuff, really, do you?
No, not at all. And here's the thing: if you take Brexit as a thing, if the UK exits with no deal, within 6 months they'll have worked out a deal. It may look awfully like a customs union or something else. In the end, I'm not sure that people voted for Brexit in the UK because of business. I think there was a more fundamental fairness in society, control of destiny.
Yeah, for me, I'm just not a big fan of the bureaucracy that is the European Union.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, but the doing business together ain't going to change.
No.
Brexit is
life still goes on, doesn't it?
I
promise I'll come back here and do another podcast with you.
Very good, very good.
No deal Brexit.
No, but our biggest trading partner is the UK. It's going to change tomorrow. The fear of the uncertainty is if you get into a trade war and suddenly Trump-type tariffs start going up, the farmers here starve, the bankers over there struggle. It's the unknown that people
and you've touched on the other thing that I would have spoken about if we had more time, because obviously when you get into these sort of mutually assured destruction trade wars where everyone's tariffing each other.
Here's the thing, Johnson, I agree with your analysis. There's what he can't say, and he's pretending that there's going to be a deal, but there's no deal. He knows it, but he can't say it. The hard part for me is on the Trump thing is knowing what the end game is, because I can't figure that out.
No, I'm with you. Other than it just being a great big battle of wills.
Yeah, which is weird because there's a lot of smart guys behind him, and he's not stupid himself.
But impulsive, maybe.
I don't know. I think he's simple.
In fairness, I've been accused of being impulsive myself every now and then. Just ask our marketing guys.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, we'll wrap it up there before we get into a further hour of geopolitics. But thanks a lot. That's great chatting to you now.
Thank you.
And we'll definitely, after Brexit, if Brexit ever does happen, we'll definitely come back anyway.
Very good.
Okay, cool. And thank you for listening, and make sure you join us for the next one.